Hey everyone, welcome back.
Yeah.
So today we're diving deep into the world of gender science.
It's a big one.
It is a big one.
Yeah.
And we're going to be focusing on a book called As Nature Made Him, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Girl by John Colapinto.
Right.
And this is a really fascinating true story that really shook things up in the scientific community
It really did.
when it came out. Like, it really changed the way a lot of people thought about,
It challenged a lot of the assumptions.
yeah, challenged assumptions about gender identity,
About what shapes us.
right? Nature versus nurture,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Biology versus upbringing, all of that.
all that stuff. So
Huge questions.
huge questions, yeah.
Yeah.
And at the heart of it all is a story about identical twins,
Okay.
Bruce and Brian Reimer, born back in 1965.
Right.
And when they were just 8 months old, something really terrible happened.
Yeah.
During a medical procedure,
Uh-huh.
Bruce's circumcision,
Mm-hmm.
it went horribly wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and it resulted in him completely losing his penis.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. Devastating for the parents, obviously.
I can't even imagine
Yeah.
being in that situation.
They just wanted the best for their son,
Of course.
and they were just desperate for any solution.
Yeah.
And that's when they were introduced to Dr. John Money,
Okay.
who at the time was this leading expert in sex reassignment
Good.
at Johns Hopkins Hospital.
So this is a pretty big name.
Oh, yeah, yeah. He was renowned
Yeah.
at the time.
Wow. So Dr. Money, he kind of becomes a central figure in this whole story, right?
He does,
Yeah.
because his theories on gender identity,
Okay.
they really played a huge role in what happened next.
I see. So what was Dr. Money's thinking at the time?
Well, he was really a proponent of this idea of psychosexual neutrality.
Okay.
Essentially, what that means is that a person's gender identity
Hmm.
is shaped primarily by their environment, their upbringing,
Okay.
more so than their biological sex.
Interesting. So he's really leaning on the nurture side of this debate.
Very much so,
Yeah.
yeah. And he saw this case as like a unique opportunity
Yeah.
to test out his theory.
Wow. So he actually convinced the Reimer family to raise Bruce as a girl.
He did.
Wow.
He advocated for Bruce to undergo sex reassignment surgery
Okay.
and to be raised as a girl who they named Brenda.
Brenda. Okay.
So this involved surgical castration at 22 months old
Wow.
and ongoing hormone therapy.
So this wasn't just like a physical change, right? Like
Yeah.
Dr. Money, he really went all in on this. Like,
Yeah, he orchestrated a lot of Brenda's upbringing
really?
to try to reinforce this female identity.
Wow. So what did that actually look like?
So it was a very controlled environment. Like,
Right.
Money insisted on these annual visits back to Johns Hopkins
Okay.
for what he called counseling and evaluation.
Okay.
And during these sessions, as documented in the book,
Right.
Brenda was shown explicit images
Oh, wow.
and asked inappropriate questions about sexuality,
Oh, my.
all under the guise of shaping her gender identity.
That's so disturbing.
Yeah, and by today's standards,
Yeah.
those methods are not only considered unethical,
Yeah.
but they were incredibly harmful.
Of course.
Like you said, it's disturbing and it raises serious questions about,
Yeah.
power dynamics and informed consent.
All of that.
Yeah, and the potential for harm in research like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Like using this young child as like
As an experiment.
an experiment, yeah, for his theory.
Yeah.
It's just,
It's difficult.
it's hard to hear that.
It is.
And knowing what Brenda must have gone through. So,
Especially knowing that there were signs all along
really?
that she wasn't adapting to this imposed female identity.
What kind of signs?
So she consistently rejected feminine clothing,
Okay.
feminine activities. She preferred to play with boys
Okay.
and engage in roughhousing.
Okay.
And this led to social isolation, difficulties at school,
Sure.
largely because of these perceived differences.
So she's not fitting in anywhere.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And despite Money's best efforts,
Yeah.
Brenda was increasingly distressed during these sessions,
Yeah.
showing clear resistance to this imposed identity.
Well, and that kind of makes you wonder, right?
It does.
If gender identity is all about upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
then why was Brenda resisting so strongly?
Yeah, that's a big question.
And what about Brian,
Right.
Brenda's twin brother?
Yeah.
He must have been affected by this too.
Absolutely. Just imagine witnessing your identical twin
Yeah.
going through something so traumatic.
Yeah.
And the book really does shed light on how deeply this impacted Brian as well.
I bet.
Yeah.
So as Brenda's growing up,
Yeah.
are there any, like, cracks starting to appear in Dr. Money's theory.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Like, are there people who are starting to question what's happening? Absolutely, there are growing concerns, especially from Brenda's local therapists in Winnipeg,
Okay.
who are seeing her regularly.
Right.
They're starting to express doubts about Money's whole approach.
Yeah, makes sense.
You know, they're observing her struggles firsthand, and they're like, is this experiment actually doing more harm than good?
Right. They're really advocating for her well-being here.
Exactly.
They're seeing that something's not right.
Yeah, and their concerns are actually really crucial in what
Mostly.
happens next, because when Brenda is 14 years old,
14. Wow.
she finally learns the truth about her biological sex.
Oh my gosh.
Just imagine the weight of that revelation.
Yeah, that's huge.
After having lived as a girl for so many years.
It's like that missing piece of the puzzle kind of falls into place.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is why.
Yeah.
And soon after learning the truth,
Yeah.
Brenda makes the decision to transition back to living as a male
Wow.
and takes the name David.
David. Okay.
Yeah,
What a powerful statement
it is.
about reclaiming his identity.
Absolutely.
So tell me about David's life after this, after he transitioned back.
Well, it was a long and difficult journey, you know. He underwent multiple surgeries to reconstruct his male genitalia,
Right.
but beyond the physical challenges,
Yeah.
he was carrying this weight of profound psychological trauma. I mean, just imagine having your life manipulated like that
From such a young age,
from such a young age. It's just,
It's hard to even fathom.
it is.
Yeah.
You know, he struggled with feelings of shame,
Yeah.
and anger, you know,
of course.
dealing with the secrecy surrounding his past,
Yeah.
the feeling of being used in this experiment.
Like he was just a case study, not a person.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that,
Right.
you know, David wasn't just a case study.
He's a real person.
He was a real person with real emotions and experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
And his story really is a stark reminder
It is.
that scientific research, especially when it involves human subjects,
Right.
has to prioritize ethical considerations
Yeah.
and individual well-being
Couldn't agree more.
above all else.
So David's case really challenged Dr. Money's theory, right?
It did.
Like, what were the broader implications of this whole thing?
Huge. I had a huge impact on the field of gender science
Okay.
because David's experience became this powerful counter-argument
Right.
to the whole idea of psychosexual neutrality.
Right. Like, nurture isn't the only factor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
His case really demonstrated that biology plays a significant role
Okay.
in shaping gender identity,
Interesting.
that it's not solely determined by upbringing.
And this must have had a ripple effect on, like how we understand the whole nature versus nurture debate
It did.
when it comes to gender, at least.
It did. It forced scientists and researchers to reconsider their assumptions about gender identity.
Wow.
And it highlighted the complexity of this issue, suggesting that it's
Yeah.
likely an interplay of both biological and environmental factors.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's probably both, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And David's case also brought to light
Okay.
the experiences of intersex individuals.
Intersex. So that's
Right. So intersex refers to variations in sex characteristics that don't fit the typical binary notions
Okay.
of male or female bodies.
So it's not just male and female.
Right. And his case really shone a light
Oh.
on the diversity of human sex development
I see.
and the need for greater understanding and acceptance of these variations.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Did this lead to any changes in how intersex conditions were treated?
yeah, it did. You know,
Oh.
David's experience, along with the advocacy of intersex individuals and organizations,
Okay.
really prompted this significant shift in medical practices.
Okay, like what kind of shift?
So there was a move away from routine infant sex reassignment surgeries,
Okay.
which were often performed without the consent of the individual
Wow.
or based on incomplete information.
Yeah, so it's like we're really starting to understand
Right.
the complexity here
Yeah.
and not just trying to force people into these boxes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened to Dr. Money? Did he ever kind of acknowledge the harm?
Well, there was considerable controversy
Yeah.
surrounding Dr. Money and his methods.
Right.
And while he never publicly admitted to any wrongdoing,
Okay.
his work faced intense scrutiny,
How bad?
and his reputation was significantly tarnished
Listen.
as a result of
Yeah.
that.
And in the midst of all of this, like, how did David kind of navigate his life?
Well,
I mean, we've talked about the challenges, but
right.
were there also moments of, like, joy and resilience in his story?
There were. David's story is not just about tragedy.
Oh, okay.
It's also about resilience and the human capacity to overcome adversity.
Yeah.
He found solace and support in his family,
Yep.
particularly his father, Ron,
Okay.
and their unwavering love played a crucial role in helping him through those dark times.
It's so important to have that support system.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even in the face of such profound trauma,
Right.
human connection and love can be these incredibly powerful sources of healing.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing to hear
Yeah.
that he had that.
It was.
So did David, was he ever able to find love and build a life for himself after all of this?
He was. Yeah. He eventually got married and became a father.
Wow.
And he really found a lot of purpose in
Okay.
sharing his story,
Yeah.
advocating for the rights of intersex individuals
Right.
and speaking out against, the kind of treatment that he had endured.
That's so powerful.
It is.
To take something so painful and to turn it into something
Yeah,
that can help others and prevent others from
absolutely.
having to go through.
It's a testament to his character
Yeah.
and his commitment to really creating a more just and compassionate world,
Yeah. It's like that saying,
Yeah.
sometimes the greatest advocates are the ones who have lived through it themselves.
Absolutely.
You know?
And it speaks volumes about the need to actually listen to those lived experiences,
Yeah.
you know,
Of the people who are directly affected.
by these issues.
Yeah.
Their voices are often the most powerful agents of change.
Absolutely.
Right.
We've talked a lot about this nature versus nurture thing.
Yeah.
But it seems like David's story really kind of adds another layer
It does.
to this whole debate.
It's not an either
Yeah.
proposition,
Yeah.
It's likely this complex interplay of both biological factors and environment.
Right.
And, in David's case, his innate sense of self,
Yeah.
despite being raised as a girl,
Right.
Really strongly suggests a biological underpinning.
To gender identity. It makes you
Yeah.
wonder, how much of who we are is already determined
It's a fascinating question.
and how much is shaped by our experiences.
It is, and it's a question that continues to be explored in gender science.
For sure. Yeah.
David's case was a pivotal point
Yeah,
in shifting our understanding of gender identity,
for sure.
but there's still so much that we don't know
Yeah.
and so much more to learn.
Absolutely. So what would you say are some of the key takeaways from David's story?
I think one of the biggest ones
Yeah.
is that gender identity is complex
Okay.
and multifaceted.
Right.
It's
Not a simple thing.
It's not a simple choice.
Yeah.
It's not simply a product of upbringing.
Right.
There are likely biological factors at play,
Yeah.
although the exact mechanisms are still being researched.
Okay.
But we know that it's not just one thing.
Right.
And his experience also really highlights the importance of informed consent,
Yes. Huge.
especially when it comes to medical interventions.
Yeah.
Decisions about sex reassignment
Right.
or other treatments for intersex conditions,
Right.
they should never be taken lightly.
Right.
And they should always involve the full understanding and consent
Of the individual.
of the individual involved.
Absolutely.
And it also emphasizes the need for greater awareness and acceptance
Yes.
of intersex variation.
Right. It's not a problem to be fixed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just a natural variation.
Part of human diversity.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it underscores that critical role
Yeah.
of empathy and support
Yeah.
for people who are navigating these journeys
Absolutely.
of self-discovery,
Yeah.
especially when it goes against societal norms.
Right.
His story is really, it's a testament
It is.
to the power of the human spirit
To overcome adversity.
and to find that path towards authenticity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is, however, it's also important to acknowledge
Yeah.
that David's story, despite these moments of resilience and joy,
Right.
did tragically end in his suicide in 2004.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's so sad.
It is, and it's a reminder that the trauma that was inflicted,
Maybe not unintentional.
even unintentionally,
Yeah.
had lasting consequences.
Yeah.
And his death really underscores that profound and lasting impact
Of this experiment.
of what he went through and
Yeah.
the need for,
Sensitivity.
continued sensitivity and awareness
Yeah.
when we're talking about these issues.
When we're talking about gender identity
Yeah.
and intersex conditions.
It
Yeah. David's story is both heartbreaking and inspiring.
is.
It's really it forces us to confront these difficult questions
It does.
about gender and identity
Yeah.
and what's the role of science
Yeah.
in all of this.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most important thing for listeners to take away?
I think it's that reminder that Every individual
Yeah.
deserves to be treated with dignity and respect,
Absolutely.
regardless of their gender identity
Of course.
or their sex characteristics.
Yeah.
David's story really encourages us to move beyond those simplistic notions of just male and female,
Right.
and to really embrace that beautiful complexity
Of human experience.
of what it means to be human.
Yeah. And to approach it all with empathy
Absolutely.
and humility
Yeah.
and a willingness to learn
To learn.
from the lived experiences of others,
Exactly.
not just to make assumptions.
Right. David Reimer's journey,
Yeah.
while it was filled with pain and adversity, ultimately contributed to a greater understanding of gender
Right.
and a more compassionate approach to intersex care.
Such a powerful legacy.
It is.
Yeah.
And, as we continue to kind of delve deeper into these complexities of gender science, let's remember to do so with that sense of responsibility.
Yes.
Recognizing the impact
Yeah.
of our words and our actions
And real people.
on real people's lives.
Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much for joining us
Yeah, thanks for having me.
on this deep dive.
This was a great conversation.
I hope everyone found it insightful
Me too.
and thought-provoking.
Yeah, I hope you learned something new.
Yeah. And if you'd like to learn more about this topic,
Yes,
please
definitely.
do your own research
There's a lot of information out there.
and engage in those respectful
Yes, respectful is key.
conversations about gender identity
Yeah.
and intersexuality.
For sure.
Let's honor David's memory
Yes.
by striving to create a world where everyone feels seen,
Absolutely.
heard, and valued for who they truly are.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful sentiment
It is.
and a powerful call to action.
Yeah. So thank you for listening, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.